Hello and welcome. I finally made it. This is the first video. Hopefully in this video I'm going to explain what is the ultimate three-car garage. Well, at least what's my ultimate three-car garage. I'm going to start with this. It's my 5 Series. It's the car I use to get to work, collect crap, move stuff, tow stuff, anything you want from a daily really. I should kind of explain how I ended up at this point. Previously to this, about three and a half years ago, I had a E39 Touring with the 3-litre straight 6 auto. Unfortunately, I could never find a manual, and that thing was the most reliable car I have ever owned, up until it wasn't. The rear jacking points were crusty at best, and every MOT they got slightly worse and worse. I repaired one of them and it made it through another year, but I'd got enough of it really. It had done 270,000 miles and I think it was time to get rid. The next logical car after that would obviously be an E60. However, I don't particularly like the look of them and the gearboxes are a bit naff. So the understandable choice was to go the next model up, which was this, the F11. I couldn't quite afford a facelift model, so I went for a pre-facelift, which in the BMW world is known as an LCI model. So I ended up with this, which is a 2011, so one of the very early ones actually. It's got the 3-litre straight 6 twin turbo diesel engine, which wouldn't have been my first choice being a petrol head. However, running a V8 probably isn't the best thing to be doing for your daily car. That said, this car has around 350 horsepower and about 700 Newton meters of torque, which is ample for a daily, and I can rock around and get 40 to the gallon, even when towing, so it's ideal. From factory, it had not a lot of spec. It's got M Sport comforts, which are arguably the most comfortable seats ever in a BMW. 4-zone climate, which I'm not particularly fussed about because I'm usually the only one in here, so I don't really care what the other seats are warmed or cooled by. And other than that, I don't think it had many other options, other than, I think, cosmetic things like black pack and... no, that's it. It's even got the standard silver door cards. I've retrofitted a couple of things in my ownership, the first being the tow bar, which came from a donor F10. It's a complete factory BMW unit and has been coded properly into the iDrive system, so it works as if it left the factory. Secondly, I fitted the fully digital dash out of an LCI model, which brings the car fully up to date. The last thing being an MMI box, which sits behind the dashboard and interfaces with the iDrive system to give me CarPlay. Because unfortunately, F11s were never, well, as far as I believe, never came out of the factory with CarPlay. The only way you can do it is to upgrade the whole iDrive system to, I think it's ID7 or something like that. I can't remember, but it's a couple of £1,000s, and for 250 quid, you can't beat that. So, all in all, it acts like a fully modern car. You'd like to think that being the daily is the most reliable on the fleet, but unfortunately this has been far from that. About 15,000 miles ago I had to rebuild the engine. One of the main bearings decided to spin, so I had to have the block line bored, the crank polished, and while I was in there, I ended up replacing pretty much the whole bottom end of the engine. So this car has had new timing chains, new gaskets, all new bolts, new big end bearings, main bearings, cam cover gasket, injector gaskets, injector seals, the works. The only things I didn't touch was the head and the pistons. I've had new piston rings, but hopefully, after all that, we'll get another 100,000 miles out of it, but I'm not too sure. It seems that BMW won't acknowledge the fact that these engines eat their bearings. It's quite a common fault documented on forums, but I just bit the bullet and did it myself, because I was quoted around £7,000 to do it by someone else. And the other option was to get another used engine to replace it, but then we're in the same situation again. That might blow up as well. It suffers from some of the other F11, F10 usual problems, one being the creaky dashboard, which they're known for doing, and apparently the only way to fix that is to take the windscreen out and re-shim it, which I can't be arsed with. The front left headlight fills with water, and the replacement's £1,400, which I'm not willing to pay. I've had a go at resealing it and it kind of lasted, so I might just do that again until it actually properly breaks. Even after all those faults I've described, this is one of the only cars I've ever had where you can do a 200-mile journey and arrive at your destination and not even feel like you've even done a journey. It's one of the most comfortable cars I've ever had. It's quick, economical. I mean, what more do you need from a daily? There is, however, one thing that this car can't do, and that's off-roading. And that's the reason I have this. This is my Discovery 2, which can off-road. It's a 2004 model, Landmark, so it's got leather, aircon, all the bits you need for an off-roading trip. And I've had it about 3 years, I reckon. It's got a 2-inch lift kit, 33-inch tyres, a winch in the front, and that's about it. I've never managed to actually get it properly stuck, other than when I flooded it once in Wales, but we won't talk about that.
Uh-oh.
Living where I do in the countryside, it's often used to have an off-roader, as the roads often flood. I'm not one for liking SUVs, hence why I have a 5 Series as my daily, but when you need an off-roader, you buy a Land Rover. Well, some people do. Talking about reliability coming from the 5 Series, this has actually been alright. Other than when I flooded it and set fire to it, it's been alright. It occasionally flags up with the 3 Amigos, when if you're in the Land Rover world, you know what I mean. But for the last year, I haven't seen them. Admittedly, I did have to replace all 4 wheel bearings, all 4 speed sensors, and the ABS modules. However, since then, it's been really good. Other than the lift kit, I've also fitted a centered locking diff, which the later cars never had. So this is out of a Disco 1, which means that I have locking diff and traction control. So with the off-road tyres, it very, very, very rarely gets stuck. I have this mainly as a toy to go off-roading with a couple of mates, but it comes in useful time after time, as people in the village seem to put themselves in ditches, and it's very useful for dragging them out of that. What I love about having a Land Rover, you can just point it at stuff, and 9 times out of 10, it's out the other side. This is a prime example. I'm on a local green lane, not far from my house. It just effortlessly pulls us through things. I guess it begs the question, why a Land Rover? Cost mainly. Before this I had a Touareg V8, and that thing was average at best off-road. However, I wanted to put a lift kit on it, and it was £800, and that had to come from America. Disco 2s, the modifying scene is really big in the UK, so you can buy a lift kit for about 250 quid. Off-road tyres are cheap, and off-road steels are cheap. That's the only reason. I'd love a Land Cruiser, but again, cost. That's 8-9 grand's worth. This is only a £2 grand Land Rover, and while it keeps passing MOTs, I'm going to keep it. It does have its downsides, unfortunately. One being fuel consumption, well, lack thereof. It does, at best, 15 to 20 to the gallon, but I don't use it for long trips, and it's only a toy, so. So far I've covered my daily and my off-roader. What else could I possibly need? Well, it's this. This is my classic Mini, something I'm very proud of. I spent 3 years restoring it in my mum's garage when I was 22. It's far from standard, you might have noticed. It's painted Yukon Grey, which is a BMC colour, so it's in the right family, but never officially released on a Mini. It's got completely custom lighting, wiring, pretty much everything's custom, even the headliner. It's got a 1380 engine up front, bigger brakes, better suspension, bucket seats, harnesses, the works. I really went to town, even though I couldn't have really afforded it when I was young. The sound system in this thing's ridiculous as well. It's about £1 worth. At the time it was stupid, but this thing is loud, so you need something to drown the noise out. If someone asks me what's the one car you'll never sell, it's this. Too many bloods of sweat and tears went into this thing, and it's the car that I take to shows. By far a concourse example, but it's something I built, and it's the way I want it, and I don't ever plan to sell it, so it doesn't really bother me. I would take you out for a drive in it, however, it's winter in the UK, and the roads are salted, and as we know, Minis don't like salt. Even from new, they used to dissolve, and I'm not risking this one. In a future video, I'll go on to show how I actually restored this damn thing, but for now, it's going to go back in the garage, as I don't want it to melt. I guess that concludes really. Those are the 3 cars in my fleet. They all have their own different purpose. For me, cars are just more than boxes of metal. They create memories. Restoring this thing was definitely a memory, and it's made me meet more people than I even remember on the journey through that. And when I go to shows, I get to show it off to people, and to me, that makes it all worth it. The daily's just a daily, and the Land Rover's there just as a toy. Hopefully that concludes my ultimate 3-car garage. However, we're now 4 cars. I may have gone and accidentally bought something. It's a 2-seater convertible, and it's not a Z3 or a Z4. It's Japanese and it needs some love. It's got crusty sills. Can you guess what it is? We'll find out in the next video. See you then.
I don't think convertibles should be used in the winter.
Why? It was £400.
I should have put another coat on.